Hey everyone, how you doing? It is Wednesday, and that means our expert series. We are talking with Matt Seamus. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. I am doing great, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Hey, I don't know if you heard, but Mark Zandi from Moody's Analytics put out a note here in the last couple hours that he's declaring the recession is over, and I just thought you should know that.
Thank you.
Yeah, hey,
That's breaking news.
yeah. So I thought it was interesting, and I thought we should talk about it because you know he's either going to be right or wrong, right? It's a binary decision. It's either over or it's not. But I think it's interesting to think about. I certainly agree with Mark that we are closer to putting this health event and what will go down as the worst quarter ever in our history, which will be Q2 behind us. I also think it is very likely we grow. Q3 is better than Q2. Q4 is better than Q3. So if that's true, I wonder what that means for real estate investors. Is the worst behind us? And I thought I'd talk with you and we just bat this idea around a little bit.
I have not read this article. I'm assuming that one of maybe the primary reason that the recession, quote unquote, is over is that the stimulus that the Fed and the action that the Fed is taking is essentially limitless and has been J-Power as much as necessary. Was that a big factor in the reasoning?
I would say reason one was unemployment. The bad unemployment numbers has peaked. Continuing claims, for example, last week was down 3.9 million, which not many people talked about. He is actually calling for unemployment growth in June, which obviously just started. It's kind of like the pot calling the kettle black because he created the ADP report number that came out today that shocked Wall Street to the upside. So I almost think it's like a hedge fund manager talking his book, like, hey, I'm short, so I'm going to talk down the economy. Hey, I'm long, I'm going to talk up the economy. So we'll wait for Friday. But yes, he also then went into the Fed, and not only the Fed, but the government is going to have more stimulus. Infrastructure plan is possible. Additional tax cuts is possible. But really what he's saying is unemployment will peak this month, this Friday. And then by the end of the year, we'll cut it in half, which means a lot more people are back to work, a lot more consumption. We have all this pent up demand, which you're seeing companies report now. And again, Mark's like, dude, recession's over. Let's go.
So we've essentially thrown out the bear case that we see another spike in coronavirus cases, and that necessitates further lockdowns, which necessitate further, economic hardship across the broad spectrum. It sounds like we've essentially thrown that bear case completely out the window and said that's not going to happen.
Yeah, he's, he did put in the one line that, hey, if it comes back like 1918, the second wave is bigger than the first. Forget what I said, but that was like one line in the article, right? So he gave himself an out, but he is basically saying recession over. He's not quite saying party like it's 1999, but that was the vibe I got as I read the article a couple of different times. I'm like, dude, are you drunk writing this? But maybe he's right. Maybe we should really think about, okay, if we're coming off the bottom, what does that mean for residential real estate and perhaps commercial as well?
Yeah. Well, we certainly may be coming off the bottom, and I hope that we are coming off the bottom for employment,
Yeah.
which is a huge factor. But hey, it's not the only factor.
Right?
Yeah. There's lots of other things that play into, that play into the health of the overall economy. There's definitely a disconnect between what is happening in the stock market and what is happening in the economy. There's a huge disconnect there, right? Stock market is elevated to a large degree, and the economy is not. Now, it makes a bit of sense because the stock market generally is very forward-looking and is pricing in, what is expected to happen in the future. So it would make sense to me that the stock market would continue to, and maybe even accelerate its rise if over the worst of this from an employment perspective. I don't know that that's the license yet for me personally. Let me rephrase it a little stronger. That is not licensed for me personally yet to go on an asset purchasing spree. I think what we talked about last week still needs to happen for a discerning buyer. This period, especially for real assets like real estate, which trade slowly, they take time for transactions to develop and close. This price discovery period is still happening. And so I don't know. I am personally, I'm hopeful that his analysis is accurate, and I'm sure hopeful that jobs continue to come back and jobs, net jobs, grow and grow, and that 40 million number comes down significantly quickly. And I think that may be the case, but there are so many things that still, there are so many unanswered questions still. And I think just as an investor, I don't like uncertainty. I like to have a high degree of likelihood, or to have a high degree of confidence that the bet I'm making is going to pay off in the way that I expect. What I personally, do. So I'm not sure. I sure hope it's the case, but it's not necessarily yet what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I think what, again, just trying to peel all this together. Well, first off, if my sarcasm hasn't come through yet, let's just say I think it's a bold call to say the recession is over. I get why he's saying it. I do think it's a little hedge funny talking his book, but hey, you have confidence in your own data. I get it. I do think the consumer will come back first. I think there's some pent up demand. Actually, in China, they actually had a name. They called it revenge buying. I think we're going to see a lot of people that been cooped up flood the malls. I think it'll be a sugar high. I think it'll be a couple of weeks, and then people will retrench. But who knows? We are a consumer economy. We've always been. So maybe. But I think the commercial side is still very much price discovery. I think the commercial side, office, retail, even multifamily, I think there are structural changes to how those assets are valued that we haven't figured out yet. So I think that whole equation, where probably less than 1% of the population plays, that is still very much not understood yet. But, the last number I saw was like 62% of the population are homeowners of age. So that's a pretty big percentage. And again, I think most of the country is going to be okay. We're so underbuilt. I think there's going to be flight from New York and in California, very populous markets. The suburb movement is real. You're seeing it in U-Haul rates from New York to other states. You're seeing rent decrease in San Francisco 9% in a month. I mean, geez, this is really, really happening. So maybe that single family home is going to be the next, is going to be the best asset going forward. And you can still get a low rate before inflation kicks in. I don't know. It's maybe the consumer's going to surprise us again.
Well, I was reading a couple things earlier this week on purchase mortgage application data, which is surprisingly for some very, very healthy, very, very strong.
Higher than last year. I read this 18% higher than last year. That's crazy. Not 18% higher than last week, 18% higher than last year.
Yeah. So I think that's a really interesting data point. And this kind of goes, we talked about this last week, right? You can't read national headlines and simply, go home and think that you understand.
Yeah.
Right. That's one author's perspective on some data or some quotes that they've gathered.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is one of the really interesting things here for me is there seem to be so many disconnects. Like we talked about the disconnect between the stock market and the economy, which in my experience is not this wide. there's a disconnect in, you know, what I'm reading in headlines for maybe rent collections versus what I'm experiencing in reality. I'm reading more negative headlines than what I'm experiencing in reality. You know, it's kind of interesting for me personally to go through this period because I'm just seeing more disconnects than I've seen before. I was just talking to an operator, commercial real estate operator in North Carolina, and he probably has a couple $100 million portfolio of multifamily, retail, industrial, kind of broad set of asset classes. And he is selling 2 properties. He's in contract to sell 2 properties right now. And he was talking about his retail center that is doing extremely well. And they just signed a new lease. And so I just thought this was so fascinating. Like, it's so interesting that we think about retail and we want to group retail all into one category. And we want to put a big asterisk. Just a guy who is on the ground in a growth market that is saying, well, man, I'm not seeing, I'm not seeing what the headlines are saying personally. I just find it really interesting. It gives me pause. It gives me pause when I see this many disconnects that I can't square in my own head.
I'm just curious, what assets was he selling? Was it retail or was it multifamily, or what were the things?
One of them was a multifamily deal, and one of them was I think a relatively small, maybe $2 or $3 million, like industrial flex property.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I think you're right. I do. There are lots of disconnects, and again, the stock market and Main Street seems to be way off. I mean, the residential market is I'm shocked by, right? When I look at the demand picture versus supply, I mean, I look at my market every day, and I've been doing this 20 years. I have never seen supply so small or so few, or whatever the right word is. I mean,
for sale or for lease?
For sale. Yeah. Stuff that I would write offers on, right?
Yeah.
I mean, historically speaking, I don't know, I could write 5 to 10 offers a week pretty consistently. But in the last 4 weeks, I mean, the only stuff out there are pretty much fire burn units. I don't know where it's being held back. The sellers are just nervous. I mean, something just seems amiss. And maybe it's because everybody can have forbearance, and why. I mean, I don't know. Something seems amiss.
I think forbearance is certainly a factor, because, and I also think that it's not clear to anyone, certainly on the kind of what I'll call the retail level, like the smaller investor level. People may have an intuition for what's going to happen in the future, but for someone that is a retail investor to have a strong conviction that they know what's going to happen in the future is just very difficult for me to believe. I mean, that's a guess. That's a guess. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. And I think what that can do is lead to paralysis. And I think what may be happening is people, smaller landlords that are not getting rent payments regularly the way that they were, are probably, I can imagine, are probably thinking, well, I don't have any good options here. Like I can't evict a tenant because there's been a hold on evictions. They have no incentive to pay me, so I shouldn't expect any rent payment. Or if I'm getting rent, it's going to be reduced for some period of time. My bank is probably in some way willing to work with me. The lender's willing to work with me. So I can kick the can down the road 2 or 3 months, and that feels like enough. It feels like after I've kicked the can down the road 2 or 3 months by requesting forbearance, I don't know what else I can do.
Yeah.
I can't do anything for 2 or 3 months until this thing continues to play out, and then maybe the play will be obvious to me. And I feel like a lot of people are stuck in this. This is purely anecdotal,
Yeah. Yeah.
so this is
I get it.
me kind of speculating. But I think people are stuck in this kind of period where they feel like their hands are tied and they don't really know what to do. And we're hoping that the government is going to bail us out in some way, shape, or form, so that the forbearance goes away and I'm not forced to sell, to fire sale the property that I have. But I just think we're too early for people to be, even if unemployment may have already achieved maximum pain, I don't think many real estate owners see. Did you lose me there?
Yeah, I did. We're good. I'm hearing you fine. The video froze, but I'm hearing you okay. Are you there, Matt?
Okay, yeah, I was just saying, I don't think even if unemployment, even if unemployment may have peaked, I don't think the pain for many real estate owners peaked yet.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because I keep looking as, okay, when are the sellers going to break? Because right now the buyers are circling, and I think, frankly, given the positive news, the general positive news, buyers are going to grow, right? If we dwarf supply 5-1, it might be 10-1 in 4 or 5 weeks. So how does supply break? One, to your point, maybe kicking the can down the line, another month or two becomes clear. Okay, got to sell. I got to get out. Maybe I know we talked about Airbnb, potentially being a supply coming when they can't get, their daily rates and they overpaid for monthly rentals. Maybe that's a supply. And then the one I keep hearing about, but I've been hearing about this one for a decade, is baby boomers, right? When are the baby boomers finally going to sell their big house and downsize? Baby boomers certainly aren't going to be selling now because they don't have to, and they don't want people coming through their homes. But at some point, this gets behind us. Maybe they're like, you know what? Shoot, Florida looks pretty good. Nevada looks pretty good. I'm going to get out of wherever I am, and I'm going to sell. So I just wonder when the sellers show up, because I've never seen them so non-existent.
Well, but we talked about this, right? Would you sell today if you didn't have
to? No.
Generally, me either. Unless I was in a market or an asset class, or for some reason the underlying fundamentals of the deal were such that the deal was in a position that it was just really strong. But generally, most people are going to say, all right, I'm going to just sit on the sidelines. If I don't have to sell, I'm not going to. Even if I'm bleeding a little bit, I'm not going to sell. I think that's what a lot of people are doing.
You know what? I'm going to test this. I actually as you know, I buy fixer-uppers, fix them, and then sell them off to landlords. I came on, I think about 8 or 9 weeks ago, saying I'm going to keep buying, but I'm just going to stack inventory until this thing's behind us, right? I wasn't going to slow down. So I have 3 projects that were picked up that are done. 2 are done and finished. Another one will finish this week. I might list them just to see what kind of activity I get sometime in June, just to see. Let's make it real, right? So I'm going to do that. I'm going to wait for this 3rd one to finish. I'm going to list them and see if they get sold in June, just to test the waters. And I'm going to list them at the price I want. So we'll see. That's a good idea.
Yeah. I think I'm very interested to see how, as I read headlines and as I just kind of internalize the data and the news than I was over the last couple months. And part of that is just like a mental health information. And so, especially when it's not squaring with what I'm seeing, in my real life. So I've taken a little bit of a break, but I just think it's not the moment. It's not the moment, at least for me personally, to go make big bets. It's the moment for me for caution and for treading slowly and for developing a hypothesis as to what's going to happen in the future. It's not clear to me yet.
Yeah. And I think that's the wise decision. I'm glad we got here because, again, I'm afraid that a lot of newer investors, right, getting their first, second, or third deal may see a sign that says, the recession is over, and they may go all in, frankly, too early without doing their research, right? I have seen people deploy hundreds of thousands of dollars in a weekend when they haven't researched a market, right? Just because they feel like they have to, right? I missed the stock market bounce. I got to get in before real estate takes off. And, sometimes that's not the wise decision. So I'm glad we got there. I do think it's cautious. I've done one deal. I purchased one deal in the last 10 weeks. It closed 3 or 4 days ago. But yeah, I don't have anything else in the pipeline to buy just yet because I'm being cautious.
Yeah, likewise. Well, we actually are closing on a deal next week, but this is, and that's why I'm not advocating to stand still and do nothing.
Sure.
But I'm advocating for using a bit more, being even more discerning. You don't want to look back and, first of all, I do not think this is a moment to make a massive bet relative to what you can bet.
This is not 2010. No, this is not 2010.
But then also, that doesn't mean there aren't opportunities. There's opportunities today, there will be tomorrow, and there will be, however long this recovery takes.
Mm-hmm.
But as you go about looking at them, be a little bit more discerning would be my advice.
I agree. I think we'll wrap it up there. I think that's a good place to be. Again, just like last week's conversation with Matt, know your market, learn your market, understand what's going on. National numbers are dangerous. Somebody comes out and says the recession is over. Doesn't mean it's all clear. We're still doing deals. You're closing one next week. I closed one last week, but we've been doing this quite a while. So be cautious, watch what's going on. Any closing thoughts, Matt?
No, thanks for having me. Great to see you.
Yep.
Look forward to next week.
You got it, brother. Take care.